global and public health expert, former UN executive with UNAIDS, where I served about 20 years as country director and representative in multiple duty stations, including Ghana in 2007 to 2012, and recently in Nigeria, where I retired, for about 5 months ago. I'm very excited to be the MC for this session. Also very excited because I'm speaking in front of my two bosses, Peter Piot, the first executive director of UNAIDS, and also his brother, Michel Sidibe, the second UNAIDS executive director. Sir, it was a pleasure. I appreciate your leadership. It was a pleasure for me to work under your leadership. Can we clap for the two of them, please? So today, we're here to celebrate a remarkable milestone, which is that of SAA at 35. But it's beyond celebrating a number. It's about celebrating 35 years of leadership. It's about celebrating 35 years of commitment and dedication. It's about 35 years of impact on the AIDS response on the continent. SAA was established in 1989. It was in Marseille, in France. I was there, much more as a young professional. It happened during the 4th International Symposium on AIDS and associated cancer in Africa. That's how ICASA was used to be called. And Professor Jean-Claude Sherman of late was the chair of that conference. So since the establishment of SAA, SAA has tirelessly amplified African leadership and the voices of Africa in the AIDS response. SAA has helped shape policies. SAA has helped advance science, strengthen community engagement, and in doing so in a way that have saved and transformed countless lives. One of the legacy of SAA is the ICASA, bringing us together today, which has gone beyond just being a conference. It is a platform that is promoting health, equity, and justice. So I really want us to keep in mind that today we'll be celebrating all the founding members and board members that you can really see. They will be introduced, so appropriately when the panel conversation starts. When we look back as we're celebrating, I think it is also important that we look ahead. And then as we're looking ahead, it's important that we're mindful of the new realities on declining funding, new realities on the HIV new infections, so not declining enough, new realities on the burden of TB and malaria, which continues. We also have new realities that have to do with non-communicable diseases, climate change, and so on and so forth. So together, we have to celebrate this event, celebrate it, and also make sure that we can examine the role that SAA can continue to play in this new environment, in advancing advocacy, in ensuring that there's accountability, and also a situation where there's innovation. So please, let us celebrate this occasion with pride, with gratitude, and a renewed commitment on the mission, so that unite us. Happy 35th anniversary for SAA, and please, let's just clap before we get the program started for the SAA for reaching that 35th milestone. So now, it gives me pleasure and honor on the agenda to have some few remarks from the SAA president, and I think it's Professor Morenike who will be giving few remarks before we get started. Let's clap for Professor Morenike, please. Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I have to read the message of the President because he's actually at this time held up in the First Lady's meeting. And so briefly, I'll share his message with all of us. The President welcomes every single person, ladies and gentlemen, partners, gentlemen and women of the press. And he notes that he should please allow us, as the SAA board, to recognize the leadership and Pan-African vision of the President himself and the very reason why we are here in Ghana. This is also recognizing where we're coming from and understanding where we are right now, despite the global and financial difficulties, will enable us make a path forward. Graciously accepting that the hosting of ICASA 2025 by governments of nations is a recognition of the platform that ICASA continues to create in the countries that host it, knowing that leaders around the world listen to issues raised on this platform. He also notes that we would like to honor our leaders, that it is equally essential to recognize our communities as well as the aid response since 1989. That was at a time when ARVs were inaccessible in Africa, when some doubted that Africa could even monitor its own treatment, and that it was nearly at that time impossible to speak about HIV. And at that time, a few courageous people stood firm. They believed that if the HIV pandemic was devastating Africa, that Africa must have its own voice, and it must lead and must take ownership of the response. These pioneers, some of whom are still with us today, laid that foundation of the Society for AIDS in Africa and for ICASA, and we'll be listening to them sharing, once again, where we came from, understanding where we are based on our history, and then together at this conference, forge where we want to go going forward. At this meeting, we remember those we've lost, including Professor Femi Soyinka and Professor Ben Silman, and we honor those that are still standing. We recognize that at the beginning of this meeting, we did recognize them, but please grant the Society for AIDS in Africa board to recognize them once again. We recognize Professor Suleiman Bo, who's seated here with us. Dr. Pierre Mpele, Professor Nkano Luo, Professor Sam Akwere, and Professor Peter Pierre. So you hear and see diversity, French-speaking, different regions of Africa, and yes, we stand strong in that diversity. They all represent others who have dedicated themselves and their time to this movement. And I would also want to acknowledge Eka Williams, who is here with us. Thank you for the fight and the struggles and representing women. This year, the Society for AIDS in Africa is celebrating 35 years, and we think that's grand. It's 35 years, not 50 years, but we recognize 35 years as strength for an Pan-African movement that, yes, had been disturbed in many ways, but has chosen to stay resilient. We would not be here today without your vision and sacrifices, and let us give them a heartful applaud once again. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, we have made tremendous progress. Science continues to lead the way, hand in hand with communities, but today the HIV conversation has had to evolve. We have effective prevention tools, and we have understood treatment better than ever. Our focus is now on integration, building strong, comprehensive health systems that ensure universal access to health care without stigma and discrimination. Once again, my president asks that please do not be overwhelmed by the conference, whatever challenges we're facing, whatever it is that seems like repetition, it is only reinforcing that we can stand strong and stay resilient despite the problems. Take time to enjoy this session. and also, at the end of the conference, take time to look around Accra. On that note, we say welcome once again and enjoy the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Take time to rejoice and enjoy the conference. Before we move into the panel discussion, the first panel, we will have a 20-minute presentation that will be made by Professor Peter Piot. It gives me honor and privilege, Peter, to invite you. I met Peter for the first time when Peter was working on Projet Sida Zaire, together with Ngali Busenge, with Zila Zambi, and so on and so forth. Peter was part of the team that co-discovered Ebola virus. Peter was the founding executive director of UNAIDS. Peter has had so many awards and recognition. Peter needs no introduction. Peter, you come here from your presentation. Can you clap for Peter Piot, please? Thank you so much, Peter. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Leo, and good afternoon, everybody. I must say I'm not only very honored to be here and to launch this memorable session, but I'm also very moved that I was asked to do this, and being not born on this continent, and but also very proud what collectively we have achieved, considering where we are coming from. And okay, we should make sure that this is not about nostalgia, this session. It should be about the future. But I think it's useful to remind ourselves where we're coming from and where it all started. Because the world has changed. We've had many, many achievements, but we also have to make sure that we can build on that foundation. Oh, thank you. Ironically, the first reports on HIV, on AIDS, it didn't even have a name in these days, in Africa came from Europe. Because people like me, I was then working in the Institute of Tropical Medicine in Antwerp, and we were seeing more and more patients coming from Central Africa, then called Zaire, now Democratic Republic of Congo, and with this new thing, new disease, uniformly fatal, and it looked like what was called a gay-related immune deficiency. So the dogma of the time was that this, what we call now AIDS, was a gay disease. Only homosexual men would get it. But 1/3 of our patients were women. And so instead of, just continue the work, I was very curious, because I said, if we see 100 patients here in Antwerp, in Belgium, there must be 100 times more in the country of origin, because who can afford to come? And these were not only Africans, but also expats, and so people who lived there. And so then I was in contact with my good friend Bila Kapita, who was there, who was the head of internal medicine at Mamayemo Hospital. I knew from the times of Ebola, about 5-6 years ago, before. And that led to then, we went there together with some colleagues from CDC, US CDC. Africa CDC did not exist. There was no mobile phone. There was no Google. There was no GPS. We used, fax was about, I'm not sure that fax existed then, maybe just discovered. For those of you who are young, it sounds like the Stone Age, but there were times and we could function. And that we started in Hôpital Mamayemo in Kinshasa with, under the guidance of Dr. Kapita, and found really a true epidemic of, HIV. There had been one letter to the editor about, aggressive Kaposi sarcoma from Zambia, which was a first indicator by a surgeon, Ann Bailey. And then we had also from Rwanda and from Uganda with David Serwada's team and so on. So these were the first observations, the first reports on HIV in Africa. And what's interesting, they're all from Central Africa, if you combine, between Kinshasa and Uganda. And of course, that would change in the future. Now, there were lots of things going on. And there was a lot of basic research. And in the early days, when HIV was isolated by Luc Montagnier in Institut Pasteur in Paris, the team led by, by Suleiman Mboup in Dakar, discovered another HIV virus, HIV-2, which was this is now a first example of something new that came out of Africa. And I could go on forever, so we could find that the ancestor of HIV was found in a chimpanzee from Gabon by Martin Peters in my lab. And we found that already in the late 50s and in the 76, when we had done work on Ebola, that some people were HIV positive. But we didn't know all that. But in the beginning, there was a lot of denial that this was a problem, including by WHO. For example, the Director General of WHO, Don Mahler, who was a great Director General, but he said in a meeting in Zambia in 1985, when it was already pretty bad, that, don't make AIDS a front page issue to the detriment of malaria and tropical diseases, etc. To his credit, a few years later, he changed his mind. Good. And also the dynamic leader of UNICEF, Jim Grant, he refused to have any mention of the HIV in children in the Convention on the Rights of the Child in 1991. So I'm just mentioning that because we should not assume that there was a natural embracement of this new problem. The contrary, there was a lot of stigma, discrimination, including for people who worked with it. And that's one of the reasons that about all HIV researchers, academics, clinicians were actually young people. It was not the establishment. And that, in a sense, for people from my generation was an opportunity, because if the old generation would have adapted it, we would not have had any chance to do our work. But the first, when I think of the defining moments, small ones, a small step is that the first event that the WHO organized on AIDS was in Bangui, at the Institut Pasteur de Bangui. And Pierre, you were there, and our brother Pierre Somsé also. And this was, why was that important? Because in these days, there were no tests. We could not find whether someone was HIV positive, living with HIV. So we needed a clinical case definition. And even when the tests were on the market in the US and in Europe, they were not available in Europe. So we needed a clinical case definition, which was made there. It was not perfect, but it was better than nothing. So that was the first event. And then a year later, in '86, there was the first regional conference on AIDS that was organized by the regional office for Africa, which also initially was in great denial, didn't want to have to deal with this. They thought it's gay disease, this is not for us. And that also, I think, was, but these were technical issues. And just as a reminder, as I mentioned, in the beginning, the HIV was particularly prevalent in Central Africa, but then gradually it moved south. And I remember in 1983, in December, I went to Johannesburg. I was invited to an infectious disease conference. And I gave I told what we had found. and that there was a heterosexual epidemic coming up. And in South Africa, it's absolutely not possible, because, you know, the only cases they had were some white South Africans who had been infected in the US or in Europe. And they said, oh, we won't get that. And I said, may I remind you that the majority of your workforce in the mines are not South Africans. They come from a bit more north. And so when you look at the picture today, the epicenter, if you want, of the problem has moved really north and south and east, and which is fascinating, and it's not always well understood. Now, I'd like to say also a bit some milestones. Just for a reminder, in 1990, there were 1.5 million deaths globally from AIDS, overwhelming majority on this continent. And a milestone was a conference of the International AIDS Society, the global sister society, Vancouver, where it was announced that AIDS is no longer a pure death sentence. You can treat it. You cannot cure it. We still cannot cure it, with a few exceptions. And at that meeting, that was the first year that UNAIDS existed, and I spoke at the opening ceremony, and I said, we will not rest until the price of this treatment is as available as an aspirin. Because it was, in these days, $14,000 per person per year. In current value, that would probably be 40,000 or something like that. So out of reach. And that became a real main passion, obsession, need for necessity to bring that price down. But the obstacles were enormous. It was not only big pharma that didn't want to reduce the price. There was usually skepticism from the ministers of health, from the international development agencies. Here, the World Bank, a quote by an economist who, again, turned around later, but this is in 1998. We had already millions of deaths. And he said that the brutal fact was that those who could pay for Africa's AIDS therapy, pharmaceutical industry by way of price cuts and rich country taxpayers by way of foreign aid, are very unlikely to do so. But we would never accept that. And the lesson is that do not accept anything that really can be responsible for the deaths of people. If that's what it is, we have to find a solution. And so and after lots of activism, a combination of, let's say, negotiations, deal-making, diplomacy, activism, joining civil society, academics, and so on, the price came down, and here you see the figures for Uganda, which was one of the first countries on a smaller scale to introduce it, although Senegal was the first one, together with Côte d'Ivoire, I would say, and that the price came down, but it is now something like $1 a day. And also, I should mention that in the early days, you needed like 14, 15 pills a day. Today, 1. And I think the time is close that maybe 1 injection every 2 months or 3 months and so on. So there is enormous progress that will save a lot of lives as well. For me, a defining moment was the summit of what was then called the OAU. For those of you who don't know, this is the Organization of African Unity, the predecessor of the AU, hosted by President Obasanjo, and together with Secretary General Kofi Annan, our boss. And in Abuja on the 24th of April 2001, there was a special summit on HIV. They said also TB and malaria, but it was about HIV. Why was this so important? For at least 3 reasons. 1, every single head of state of Africa, -2, said, yes, we have a problem. If you cannot say that you have a problem, you cannot deal with a problem. And that was, for me, a most moving moment. Exception was President Mbeki from South Africa. And secondly, it elevated the discussion from a technical one, public health, to a political level. At the level of the heads of state. And we will see that also later in the ICASA meetings. And thirdly, it led to the UN General Assembly special session on AIDS, which was also historic because of the declaration on, to deal with AIDS. So this is where Africa, and I'm forever grateful to President Obasanjo and to also Kofi Annan. At the same time, we had civil society coming up in various parts of Africa. And the result was a decline in new infections in and of deaths. So there we can come back to that later. Here comes, the Society on AIDS in Africa. As we heard, first event was in Marseille. Ironically, the first conference was in Brussels. The second one was in Naples, in Italy. Only the third one was in Arusha, in Tanzania, and then was Marseille. And this is where you all put it all together. And I think it's also a first example of a Pan-African professional disease health society. The first one. And it shows how AIDS has been the forefront for many things. I'd hoped that I could show something that is one of my favorite songs, Attention à Sida, by one of the big masters of the Congolese music, Franco. And thanks to Michel Sidibé, who was then based in Kinshasa, this was a song which I can't play, but that really had more impact than any traditional public health campaign, because it was so popular. Yes. No, for tonight we can go on, but so this showed that it was also the world of culture, the popular music. All this was now, it became a movement. The politics were there, people like us. And then I think the conference in Kinshasa was also a breakthrough. For the first time, major international attention in the media, the New York Times, Le Monde, just name it. And it was a pretty chaotic event, but 1,500 people, and we had thought that there would be 700 coming. And then Dakar, and we'll hear, of course, from Suleiman about it, because Dakar also important because for the first time a president of the Republic was addressing the conference, President Diouf. And we also had the creation of the Society on Women and AIDS in Africa. We had Youssou N'Dour, another hero for music, and we had also the Director General of WHO, Nobel Prize winners, etc. So this became then also very good. So I know I have to stop, and I'll go just to say a few words now, and then I stop. All this is very interesting, and I think we've all worked very hard against everything that you can think of, but it's about the future. The world has changed, and we also have to change. But the Society on AIDS in Africa, Society on Women and AIDS in Africa, ICASA, will be needed more than ever. But we have to do it differently and adapt to the new world. And it's about leadership, it's about how to convene, it's making sure there's a new generation of leaders, this new, we have the social media, all this, it's not up to me to say this, and also to support Africa health sovereignty. The movement that is also kind of coming out of here with President Mahama on August the 8th, convening, and then the Africa Reset Agenda. And I would like to pay tribute to the boss of Michel and me, Kofi Annan, a son of this country, who really, without him, we would also not be there where we are now. This is So let me conclude by thanking you again, and also thanking so many of my friends from the early days. And there are many, and it's always unfair to see, but people who I learned so much about, who are still there, some of them are not, and I think these, we can say, are pioneers that I worked with, but there are many more. So thank you so much for it.
Another round of applause for Peter, please. Let's render justice to this excellent presentation, taking us back from where we were before the journey that we have traveled, denial, and now we're seeing progress. And look, I'm sure we took note of the last slides. That's what we want. I have said, as we look back, we also have to reflect, looking ahead with the role that SAA, so will do. And you said it, I just want to say what you've said. SAA is needed more than ever, and providing some strategic direction around leadership, around advocacy, activism, convening, political influence. I think all that is important with the regs and so on and so forth. Again, thank you so much for Peter. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Aliou Sylla. Aliou Sylla will moderate session 1. Session 1, it's all about foundation and legacy. Can we clap for Aliou? Aliou is a medical doctor from Mali. Aliou was first one to start ICASA. ICASA is the first organization in Mali that provided care to the people living with HIV and AIDS, and also the SAA providing treatment. So Aliou will lead session 1. It's about foundation and the legacy. Again, we'll learn a lot from the founders. We'll learn a lot, from the board members. And Aliou, you have the floor. Thank you so much, Aliou.
Merci. Merci. Quand même, permettez-moi de remercier Peter Piot qui vient de planter le décor. Et moi, c'est un grand honneur de pouvoir modérer devant Michel Sidibé. Parce que c'est mon grand frère, c'est mon mentor. Donc, je pense que vraiment, je serai à la hauteur. Et ce qu'on me demande, le travail est devenu facile. Juste, c'est pour vous rappeler, avec vos smartphones, prenez les photos ici et la traduction est instantanée. Voilà, n'oubliez pas cela. Donc, la session que nous allons avoir, c'est vraiment devoir de mémoire. C'est un devoir de mémoire. Nous avons la chance d'être là encore avec ceux qui ont été les pionniers, qui ont jeté les fondements. Nous avons vu les photos de suite. Et quand on voit les photos de Suleiman Boub, à l'époque, vous voyez, donc ça veut dire que c'est quelque chose. Donc rapidement, je vais appeler M. Suleiman Boub, qui a été le président de ICASA à Dakar. Professeur, merci. Ensuite, j'appelle M. Pierre Pelé, qui a été le président de la Société africaine anti-sida 1995-2005. J'appelle Luo, qui a été président de ICASA en 1999 à Lusaka. J'appelle Sam Okware, qui a été président de ICASA en 1995. J'appelle Sheila Tlou, qui est membre trustee de la Société africaine anti-sida. Et j'appelle M. Innocent Leson, si les temps le permettaient, assis serait avec nous, mais pour la représentation de la société civile dans toute sa dimension, M. Innocent Leson, merci de se joindre à nous. Merci d'avoir répondu à notre appel. Suleiman, Peter Piot vient de présenter vraiment quelque chose qui est très édifiante. Votre implication depuis les fondements de la société civile. Est-ce que pouvez-vous nous partager vraiment votre vision, aussi nous faire le compte-rendu de la création de la SAA? Qu'est-ce qui était à l'origine, ainsi de suite. Merci. Est-ce que tu as une présentation? Voilà. Donc, ça passe.
Les slides. J'avais une présentation. Est-ce qu'on a mis les slides?
Les slides de Suleiman Boub. Non, on parle des slides. On ne parle pas de la lumière.
Peut-être qu'on peut démarrer et je pourrais montrer ça après. Peut-être qu'on peut continuer et je pourrais montrer ça, ouais, pour ne pas perdre de temps. Voilà, je voulais illustrer ça par des photos.
Vous avez pu retrouver? Donc je vous pose la question.
Voilà, moi j'avais illustré ça.
D'accord, ok.
Tu peux continuer avec les...
Non. Hein?
Et moi, c'est ce que je voulais montrer.
Après, tu vois.
Voilà.
Donc on peut continuer avec les autres en attendant. D'accord. Donc Suleiman nous propose de continuer avec les autres en attendant qu'on retrouve. Il n'y a pas de souci. Ok. Maintenant, c'est de voir avec le grand frère Pierre Pelé, qui a été président de la Société africaine anti-sida en 1995 en 2005, par rapport au leadership gouvernemental. Pierre, c'est une réflexion sur la manière dont les gouvernements africains ont utilisé les plateformes ICASA pour négocier des engagements politiques, mobiliser des ressources et définir des priorités. Oui. Que ce soit là ou là, il n'y a pas de problème. Mais il peut s'asseoir aussi. Hein. Tu peux t'asseoir aussi, hein. C'est ça qui est bien sur le panel. Ça c'est simple. Tu peux t'asseoir et puis là où tu es à l'aise. Voilà. Voilà, avec les vieux, soyons...
Yes.
Bon. C'est ça aussi la lutte contre le sida, hein? C'est des va-et des viens, voilà, vas-y.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aliou. I have 5 minutes to illustrate how the ICASA platform influenced the African government to lead the HIV response in Africa, and mainly to mobilize resources and to set priorities. I'm going to go through 4 ICASA. The first one is the ICASA 1997 in Abidjan. The main topics of that ICASA was access to AIDS treatment in Africa, because the African community, the African people living with HIV wanted ARV drugs because it was not affordable, overly expensive. So we started fighting and mobilizing government to African people to have access to treatment. And the president of France, Jacques Chirac, who attended the opening ceremony of that ICASA meeting, made a powerful declaration in terms of, okay, from France, we are going to establish access to treatment solidarity funds. That was like the precursor of the global fund. The second ICASA is the Lusaka, 1999. My sister Luo was the Minister of Health and the chairperson of ICASA in Lusaka in 1999. And the topic, the theme of that ICASA was looking into the future. You know, we were already talking about the future. And the future we have been looking for has been, you know, we were very disappointed because no head of state attended that ICASA, no African head of state. We had the vice president of Zambia, but we needed the head of state to attend ICASA and support us to move the HIV agenda in Africa. And participants, all of us, activists from Africa, from the world, people living with HIV and community leaders, we reacted badly because of the absence of a head of state. And the government, African government leadership was questioned. So, and then what was the reaction? I think that is because of what we did in 1999 in Lusaka, in Zambia, that 2001 was the turning year in the fight against HIV in Africa. And I want to pay a tribute to President Obasanjo. Peter Piot has spoken about the commitment and the role of President Obasanjo because is in 2001, we had in Abuja the special summit of the African Union to lead the HIV response in Africa. And also we had the Abuja Declaration, a very powerful declaration on health. Is an agreement to allocate at least 15% of the national budget to health, not to HIV/AIDS response, but to health. And we are still having less than 10 countries in Africa that have achieved this target. And also in 2001, the setting up of the AIDS Watch Africa, our 8th head of state in Africa, had a mandate from the African Union Summit to lead advocacy and accountability platform to make sure that they will be committed against HIV. And then the Ouagadougou 2001, it was let's think about government, but also from the communities. And that's where we put the people at the center of the fight against HIV in Africa and the involvement of the communities in general, but mainly the people living with HIV as a central group to fight HIV. And we also said the people should not be longer only the target of our interventions, but the agent of change. And then Abuja 2005, that was a kind of the critical analysis of various initiatives undertaken by African leaders. And at that ICASA, I can summarize by saying that we, Africa, we committed to the 3 ones. I think that you know the 3 ones is one plan, one monitoring and evaluation system, and one plan. So we wanted to lead and having the 3 ones as part of our part of the tools to fight HIV. And then the last one in 2005, Peter Piot and President Obasanjo signed the ACHAM, signed and established the Africa Center for HIV Management based in Lagos at the University of Lagos. So that is, I just wanted to show you how the ICASA used to advocate and influence the role of the government in Africa. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Suleiman, comment ICASA a commencé comme une plateforme permettant aux Africains de s'approprier le discours sur le VIH en veillant à ce que la voix et les données, les expériences africaines influencent sur la réponse. Vous avez la parole.
Merci. Les diapos, s'il vous plaît.
Je ne peux pas couper mon maître, mais merci.
Voilà, je vais faire assez vite. En fait, on a très peu de temps qui nous a été imparti et j'ai préféré, pour raconter l'histoire, l'illustrer sous forme d'image. Donc ce sera plutôt un défilement d'images. Donc la première, je vais en commenter juste quelques-unes. Donc la première réunion du Global Programme on AIDS a démarré et c'est à cette occasion-là que le responsable à l'époque du Global nous a conviés, Fred Malou, moi-même, et on était avec Debrowok Zodi, et de venir parler de la création d'une société anti-sida en Afrique, à l'instar de l'IAS, la conférence internationale sur le sida. Donc, et à cette occasion qu'on a décidé, après, comme l'a dit Peter, la réunion de Kinshasa et la première réunion de la SAA, de décider que les réunions ne se tiendraient plus ailleurs. Parce qu'avant, c'était la conférence internationale sur le sida et les maladies et le cancer. Et on a décidé de nommer ça ICASA, la conférence internationale sur le sida en Afrique. Et on a décidé qu'elle ne se tiendrait qu'en Afrique, parce qu'avant, c'était alternativement en Afrique et en Europe. Et vous avez l'organisation avec les comités, et comme l'a dit, c'était ouvert par le président de la République, et vous avez professeur Ben Slimane, et vous aviez des activités scientifiques, mais ça a été rehaussé par des réceptions au palais, et vous avez des jeunes à l'époque, comme Pierre, que vous avez reconnu. Mais vous avez également Manu Dibango, qui avait... L'importance des astuces était importante. Youssou Ndour, Manu Dibango ont énormément contribué pour faire valoriser. Il y avait le directeur de l'OMS Afrique, Mone Kossou. Bon, il y avait Mone Kossou et le directeur général de l'OMS pour dire la présence très importante à l'époque. Et vous aviez Ben Slimane, bon, vous aviez la soirée de Youssou Ndour, donc avec le premier prix de la SAA qui a été donné à cette occasion. Donc vous aviez Abdourahmane Sow, parce que c'est lui qu'on avait chargé d'organiser la SAA. Et vous avez quelqu'un ici, je pense, qui se reconnaît, voilà, et qui a été honoré à l'occasion. Et vous aviez également Montagnier, le directeur de l'OMS. Donc vous aviez Bila Kapita également, qui a été honoré. C'est Montagnier et Bila Kapita. Et ensuite, on a organisé la conférence sur le sida. J'ai eu la chance d'avoir organisé 2 fois ICASA, en 1991 et en 2008. Donc en 2008, c'était le président Wade aussi, qui était accueilli ici, avec le directeur de l'UNS, Ibrandoy, l'inséparable Ibrandoy Suleiman Boub. Donc le président Wade et son premier ministre. Et puis il y avait les premières dames à l'époque. C'était vraiment une grande fréquentation des premières dames, pas seulement par leur présence, mais par leur implication dans les réunions. Donc ces premières dames toujours. Là c'est à l'ouverture, mon allocution. On a donné aussi des cadeaux aux chefs d'État qu'ils ont comme souvenir dans leur bureau. Et Femi Soyinka, des activistes. Donc le prix Nobel de médecine à l'époque, Françoise Barré-Sinoussi, à cause du VIH. Et vous avez également le ministre de la Santé de l'époque, qui est là aussi, Safia Toukam, avec le groupe des activistes, les communautés, le professeur Eva-Marie Kolsek également, qui a reçu, et également, comme je l'ai dit, il y avait Youssou Ndour, cette fois-ci, avec Angélique Kidjo, le rôle a été très important. Et vous avez beaucoup de débats avec des activistes comme Jeanne Capiga. Et vous aviez aussi les premières dames, mais qui sont venues pas seulement pour assister, mais pour participer encore. Et vous aviez quelqu'un que vous connaissez, Aliou Silla, avec la première dame. Donc vous aviez le Premier ministre qui est venu lui-même, vraiment pour participer à la conférence. Bon, j'étais en militaire à l'époque, hein, le ministre de la Santé à l'époque. Toujours nos amis assis. Bon. Je crois que les salles étaient pleines, je vais bientôt terminer. Donc vous aviez du monde. Ok, vous reconnaissez, je crois, notre ami. Donc les salles étaient toujours très pleines. Las Collins, qui a joué un rôle très important en tant que président de l'IAS, les premières dames, encore les premières dames. Ça refuse, je crois que ça en dit assez. Je voulais juste terminer par cette lettre de félicitations du président de la République du Sénégal, surtout celle de 2008. On prétend être à peu près 11 000 participants venant d'une centaine de pays. Et ça a fait une influence considérable. Et comme il l'a dit, cela a dépassé tous les espoirs à ce niveau-là et cela a eu un impact considérable. Voilà rapidement résumé l'historique de l'ICASA.
Excellent. Ça, on appelle ça no comment. Vraiment excellent. Merci de nous replonger. Sheila, je vous donne la parole pour que vous nous montriez le rôle de ICASA dans le mainstreaming, genre, droits humains. Hein? Voilà, la vie est chouette. Tu as la parole.
Merci.
Jasim.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Let me recognize my president, the president of SAA, Dr. Parire Nyata, who came after we started. And I want to recognize my former bosses, my mentor, Peter Piot, my boss, Michelle Sidibe. He and I went through quite a few of the wires, and it's great. So I'm happy to be standing before you, and my remarks will be really directed towards the young people, especially the women, because we say AIDS is not over, but yes, it's true, but it seems to be rising among young people, especially women. So let's listen to a little bit of the history. The history of SAA, my history will be intertwined in there because I'm standing before you as a former civil society. So civil society activists, hello. Yes, you have here somebody who started there and later became something else and is now still something else, but I'm still an advocate. Okay, so in 1985, the first person living with HIV in Botswana was diagnosed. There was a lot of denial at that time. Peter Piot has already talked about that. Worldwide, it was still a disease of gay people. And now in Botswana, because at that time, there were quite a lot of people who were coming from other countries to come and work in Botswana, which was booming, it was seen as the disease brought by foreigners, so that you only got it if you slept with foreigners. That's right. And the president at that time was in denial. I didn't want to talk about it at all. I decided to go ahead in there. I didn't know anybody who was infected, but it was really from the women and gender perspective. I was already a women and health activist, having participated in the UN conference in Nairobi, 1985. So that I figured, look, if this is really going to be here, women are going to be more vulnerable because of what I knew, the social and whatever. So, and indeed, I went in there, but from that perspective. So in 1988, the Society for Women in AIDS was founded by great activists, women advocates, scientists. One of them is right there, Eka Williams, please stand up. Yes, this is 89, Nkanduluo, aha. And quite a few, but some are not here, but they're still alive, they're still there, and we are still SWA. So it was from SWA that I joined SAA when it was formed in '89, mainly because as SWA we saw this as a continental movement that will be able to ensure that gender is mainstreamed in all our policies and programs. And indeed, we collaborated and ensured that all SAA conferences, we are there, but really influencing what has happened in terms of gender, human rights, and all that. And that's how we're able to drive that. I must say to you, the young people, that Society for Women and AIDS in Africa, the SWA, we had no money at all. Sometimes we used our own money, and our husbands were not particularly amused. But we had to do something about it. I remember in my case, I was supposed to get a car, a Mercedes-Benz, and I asked my husband if he could postpone it for 9 months so that I used the money to form the SAA branch of Botswana, since I was also regional coordinator. And he agreed, but then after 9 months, it was like, where's the money? So anyway, but the point is that we then became part of the Society for AIDS in Africa, and all the conferences, we were right there. Now, how did SAA, the Society for AIDS in Africa, influence Africa in general? I'll talk about myself because I saw how I went from being a researcher under SAA, knowing that I have to present at AIDS conferences, working also with the Botswana-Harvard Partnership with Suleiman Mboop, who was the board member, and really seeing how we ensure that we give the ministers evidence-based, something that they can use for evidence. So I would say, firstly, SAA was able to influence in terms of finances. For example, the Abuja Declaration, SAA was right there, ensuring that advocacy. And it helped me. In 2004, I was appointed Minister of Health. When the president appointed me, I said to him, I am comfortable at the university. I don't even want to be a politician. But if you give me 15% of the budget, I will become a minister. And he said, I'm giving you 20%. And with that, I have a long story here. With that, I was able to work with civil society, SWA in country, and other SWA branches to bring down mother-to-child transmission from 29% to 8% within 4 years. Now, that was the best practice based on the research that was, provided by SAA. So that in terms of providing evidence, it was there, and it was really up to us as countries to be able to use that evidence. And indeed, Peter Piot says it's not over. We still need to do that research to provide the evidence. I must say that Botswana is now the leading country when it comes to elimination, the triple elimination. We just got the gold card. But it was work that was followed because somebody decided to put more money because of the influence of SAA, and somebody decided to, as a result of that, work with civil society, work with people living with HIV to bring down HIV. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We can talk some more.
Thank you. Merci. Oui, Lio, on va voir le lien entre la science et vraiment la plateforme ICASA, comment les données ont été utilisées.
Thank you very much, moderator. My name is Professor Nkanduluo from Zambia. And I saw that when Professor Peter Piot was showing the photos, he did not show the women. But I want to share this afternoon that I was the first vice president to Professor Ben Sleman, and I also became vice president to PM Pele. So the women were there. ICASA has been a very important driver of science on the African continent. In fact, the birth of ICASA was to bring together scientists and clinicians who were facing the patients with HIV together so that we share the science. We had some of the most competent scientists under very difficult situations. We didn't have the technology that is there today, where you could just, with a punch of the button, you have a graph made, or the calculations are made, but people produced sound science. However, as time went on, we realized that science alone is not adequate, because science must be translated into the overall picture of HIV, meaning our people needed to benefit from the scientific findings, which is what we are talking about today. If there wasn't this science, there was no thought process of translating science to beneficiaries, we wouldn't be here today. So, what did we do? at the Lusaka meeting in 1999, we introduced the concept of community. So we put up a community village so that the different communities, those that are living with HIV, those who are affected, can come and demand, so that they demand services. Counseling, so that they are properly counseled based on the scientific findings, because we're able to show not only the disease processes, but also the stigma and the other issues associated with HIV. So from this community village, we now needed to bridge the gap between science and the community. What was the bridge? That was policy. And fortunately, I happened to have been the Minister of Health and drove my other colleagues to ensure that we start putting up policies that are people-centered, not just policies, but people-centered. And we then picked some of the critical things that were in science. For example, the transmission of HIV from mother to child. Today, some of the countries, and here I would like to commend Botswana, that celebrated total elimination of mother-to-child transmission. Professor Pia talked about ARVs. It was the science that drove us to demanding through our community and government putting up appropriate policies to be able to ensure that the people had access to ARVs. Today we celebrate ARVs. So, ICASA is an important vehicle that bridges science, policy, and benefits to the community. I would like to say in conclusion to the young people that are present here, we were young when we were doing the kind of work we are talking about. So, my dears, let us now look at intergeneration response to HIV so that you, the young people, bring your energies, the science, and we, the older people, share our experience with you, and together we can. Thank you.
Innocent, Sam, one moment. Innocent, tu peux venir juste compléter par rapport à l'engagement communautaire. One moment. C'est-à-dire, qu'est-ce que ICASA a pu renforcer dans le leadership communautaire? Comment la voix des communautés a été portée?
Alors, merci. Je crois que c'est une surprise pour moi, et surtout d'être honoré, d'être parmi ceux-là qui m'ont couvé. Parce que quand je vois Michel Sidibé, je pense à une chose, il me dit, il faut toucher le cœur. Et ça, depuis, je suis dedans. Et quand je vois Peter, une image, ICASA 2005, c'était à Abuja, quand on venait pour essayer d'intégrer la conversation. On nous avait parqué quelque part comme village communautaire et on était là à voir comment c'était dégradé. Et depuis, je m'en souviens, get up, stand up, get up for your right. That's what we were singing that time. And then, I have to say that, honestly, when we talk about communities, we move from, you are talking, we're dying. Remember, we did not access to the conference room. We never get access to ICASA till 2005. And it was a separate program. I'm the one leading that separate program, the community program. You're talking about scientific research, you're talking with dying. And then, when we came to Dakar, 2008, the first integration of, why we get this? Thank to Professor Soyinka. I work very close with Professor Soyinka to get that. And the second important thing, SWA, ICASA, and NAPLIS, we went together building our memorandum, a common document to always have a seat on ICASA. It was a fight, and we fight just to move from you talking, we dying,
Now we're talking about we want more quality health services. And due to that conversation, the common conversation we have with scientific, the conversation we have with leadership, community succeeded to move from you talking, we dying, to we need now more quality of life. I thank you.
Merci. Voilà. Donc Sam, on te donne le mot de la fin
Very
pour
nice.
que tu nous parles des défis.
Very nice, very nice.
Voilà.
Very nice. Compatriots, friends, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dr. Sam Okware. I had a special opportunity. I had a special opportunity and special privilege to have put together the first AIDS control program, I think, in the region. And I also had a special opportunity to move between the regions, trying to put together the AIDS control programs in the various areas. And I would like to thank my colleagues, Piot at the international level, and also Siddiqui at the national level. Uganda, he was the UNICEF country program manager. And I would also like to thank the MC for making me the last, because I think this is the only message which will actually stay sunk into your head, having been the last person to do the talking. I have been told to limit my presentation to just one item. What were your challenges? And the challenges in sexual matters are many, but let me just focus on a few which touch the people, which touch the population, the community where I worked in Uganda. Early challenges were many, conceptual challenges, contextual challenges. And in fact, there was suspicion. There were many unknowns. A disease which is insidious, coming quietly and eating the population. Everybody says that this disease has actually, witchcraft is what has brought this disease, because only the best of the best are the ones that participated in this process and died. The mode of transmission was unknown, evolving, and worrying. In fact, in our society, sex is very sensitive, and unfortunately, it's also a source of wellness. It's a source of wellness and self-esteem and hope for the population. This is where the problem was. So this was compounded further by the fact that ill health existed in the entire communities. In all rural communities, somebody is always sick, low-grade fever, low-grade weakness, and people accepted that this was normal. And so to say that you should not have sex because of a low-grade fever was not acceptable. The other problem, I think, the challenge which we actually got, was that STDs was seen to be that of brave men. In fact, they have a special word in Uganda where they say STDs are a disease of the brave. This word is not for the faint-hearted. It is only those who have the strength to move on to the next stage that are actually able to proceed. And for them, they think this life is just transition, having sex and moving forward. Now, the message was another thing which was complicated. First of all, we're emphasizing one message only. We're looking at the products. They were not looking at the byproducts. Sex gives you byproducts and also other products. What we also forgot is that sex is an investment. For many of the societies at home, many of the communities, they are relying on sex for hope, they are relying on sex for inheritance, and they are relying on sex for dowry, getting money and lifting themselves up. So when you talk about HIV and stopping sex, that was not acceptable as far as they were managed. They even said, but even here we have other risk factors. If you try to go with somebody's wife, you are beaten and killed. So which is less of a bother? So they said, fine, we will move on, but under what we call risk management, good risk management. So you'll tell me when you're almost, say 3-4 minutes to tell me. No, give me 2-3 minutes, yeah. So what we did was that against these critical challenges, we therefore also the other aspect, which was a critical challenge, was marriage. The concept of marriage in a community, a rural community, is not known. Nobody knows when it starts, marriage starts, and nobody knows when it ends, And it's normally negotiated by third party. So you cannot say no sex until marriage. Nobody knows. There is no definite line. There is no line which is very clear. So the community rebelled. They said, no, we shall continue with our sex as individuals. But then the other communities came in saying we have our own parameters determined by the community, and therefore we have our own actors. So at the end, I think ICASA, is where they helped us. They helped us to do what? They helped us to come and risk management. They domesticated the face of AIDS, they domesticated the evidence, they domesticated the response, and we put our efforts on the heterosexual transmission. We did not put our effort on punishment. We put our effort on harnessing sex. Sex is an energy. It will pick it up and use it. And so that's how our program, the ABC, started. And so we said, before we continue, we have to shift our research into anthropological at the local level, at the international level, and that sex must be harnessed for public good. For Mercedes, we also decided that we should recruit other actors who are more believed. For instance, the church, they are the only ones who can talk about morality, not a politician. So, and so on and so forth. And so even when it came to the actual showing of people who had AIDS, we had to get physical people with AIDS who are credible. The problem in Africa is, in fact, in my society is, someone says, let me see. He doesn't just see with his eyes. He also wants to palpate. He wants to see and also palpate. So I bring somebody like Louis Time, a musician. To them, we actually brought everybody together, harnessing and then changing the messengers and the options were. In conclusion, allow me just to say how grateful we are to ICASA for sharing, for landing, for building partnerships, and for harmonizing especially gender options, because gender is very important. The women, without a woman, you can't have a lot of sex in rural communities. So if we've been able to fight stigma, and the last item I have to say is leadership at all levels. In Uganda, for instance, the president himself supervised the program. And I think at the community level and at the household level, each one took care of that. For matters in the bedroom, we left that to democratic governance. But indeed, both the people in the bedroom, male and female, they decided how to proceed. I think we should, in that, as I conclude, I think we're talking about past leaders. We must clap for a few people. Professor Piot and Professor Dibide, I think you started all this program. You merged us with the International AIDS Society. You sold the idea to us. We took it up, and we'd like to thank you very much. And even more importantly, I think Luke and your team, ICASA Secretariat, we take it for granted that you were able to do this, but the ICASA Secretariat should be congratulated for having kept the fire going. Thank you so much, and we all hope that you'll be able to live up to and beyond 2030. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci. Très rapidement, nous allons voir si la réaction de la salle. On peut prendre une, deux, trois questions. La salle a la parole. Oui.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Vraiment, je remercie tous les anciens. J'ai vu vraiment tous les combats qu'ils ont menés. C'est bon. J'ai dit que je remercie tous les aînés et j'ai vu tous les combats qu'ils ont menés. Je voulais vraiment faire un témoignage à mon aîné, ancien de l'école militaire de santé. Il a été pharmacien colonel. Je veux parler du professeur Mboup. J'étais reçu au concours de l'internat en 1990. Et c'est en ce temps qu'à une réunion, il m'a convié, j'étais tout jeune, et je voyais des enfants qui venaient mourir de pneumopathie. Et c'était en ce temps l'histoire naturelle de l'infection à VIH chez l'enfant, où les enfants voulaient mourir de pneumocystose à pneumocystis carinii, qu'on appelle aujourd'hui pneumocystis gynovesi. Et donc vraiment, je tiens vraiment à le remercier. Je crois que ça a été mes premiers pas. Et en 2008, j'étais revenu à Dakar pour faire la plénière sur HIV et pédiatrisme. Merci beaucoup, mon colonel. Vous avez tous mes respects. Aujourd'hui, je suis colonel-major et j'en suis vraiment très fier. Merci.
Okay. Merci, Alain. Une autre réaction? C'est là-bas? Il n'y a pas d'autres réactions? Voilà, il faut donner le micro. Vas-y, vous avez la parole.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mine is actually a question and also to thank the founding fathers of ICASA for the great work you've done so far, for the wonderful work you've done in Africa and bringing us to this point that we are right now in the fight against HIV. I would like to ask Professor Sheila this question. When you were presenting, you spoke a lot about the work you've done in the fight against HIV. And I want to ask, looking at the donor funding cuts and all of that that is happening now around the globe and in Africa especially, how will Africa bridge the gap when it comes to the provision of ARVs for our people? Because take it or leave it, the ARVs are still very expensive, and we are not producing any here in Africa. I don't know if we are, but I stand to be corrected. How do we bridge this gap? How do we make it available? How do we make it cheap for even the least of our populace to have it? Thank you.
Thank you. Il y a une autre personne? Voilà, et voilà. On prend les deux questions.
Merci de me donner la parole. Je me présente, je suis Dr Miekeje Kalorine et je suis ici au nom de Médecins sans frontières. Déjà, je voulais remercier les panélistes pour tout ce que vous venez de nous présenter sur l'historique de ICASA. C'était très touchant. Ce qui m'a le plus intéressé, c'était le fait de rappeler quels ont été les éléments poignants, les éléments forts qui ont permis d'amener le changement dans la lutte contre le VIH et qui ont fait voir les résultats que nous avons en ce jour. Maintenant, il serait bien de pouvoir s'appuyer exactement sur ces éléments, sur tout ce qui a été fait par le passé, afin d'atteindre nos objectifs sur la fin du VIH et du sida dans le monde. J'ai vu dans la première slide de Pierre Piot qui a mis les conclusions sur les prochaines 10 années. C'était un très bon plan, mais je ne vois pas la partie active comme un pledge que pourrait faire la communauté, la SAA, les pays de l'Afrique pour atteindre ces objectifs. Est-ce qu'il y a un plan qui devra pouvoir se mettre là-dessus? Merci.
Ok. Merci. Donc, Sheila. Parce qu'il y a une autre session après cette session. Voilà.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that question. I'm glad that Michelle Sidibe is here to answer part of it in terms of what Africa is doing, about our medicines and all that. I don't know. I think I will give you so you can give your thoughts. But I'll answer the very first part on how Botswana, did in terms of financing. To say that Botswana at that time, well, even now, had actually the best ingredients for a politically sound response to HIV and AIDS. Namely, the resources were there. But then, of course, other countries also have resources. What was also there was the political will and commitment to say we are going to devote more than 15% of our budget to health. But not only that, we also work with the private sector. So that when you are saying financing, we also talk about domestic financing. I worked very well with the private sector and was able to roll out ARVs much faster working with the private sector. Another ingredient was zero tolerance for corruption. That's something that we can use in Africa. You know, we have resources, but sometimes those resources are not spent where they were supposed to be. Instead, they line politicians' pockets. So that at least that part was not there. And I think with advocacy, we can be able to ensure that we bring in leaders who can say we are going to devote our resources to keeping our people healthy. That's number one. So in terms of markets, well, working together for, for medicines and all that. Michelle, can I give it to you to say where Africa is? Yeah. Yes, yeah, I'll give it to him because there is some progress, yeah. Oh, it's the next session. Oh, okay, you'll have to wait for the next session, but there's a lot happening in terms of that, yeah.
Merci. Je crois que nous avons fini, mais quand même nous avons été témoins d'informations fondamentales et qu'on a eu, oui, de la bouche des personnes les plus appropriées. Nous avons vu le passage du leadership, de la gouvernance, l'engagement communautaire, la place de la science, recherche et développement. Et donc notre outil, ICASA, c'est une plateforme mise en place, cette société africaine anti-sida, par les pères fondateurs qui sont là, qui ont tout fait, qui se sont battus à des niveaux vraiment les plus élevés. Donc cet acquis, nous avons le devoir d'entretenir cette plateforme pour mener le combat et arriver à terme à mettre fin au VIH, SIDA et aux autres vraiment maladies connexes. Je ne peux que les féliciter parce que ce qu'ils ont fait, c'est no comment. Les images étaient parlantes. Et je vous demande de les applaudir très fort et qu'après cette session, vous restez dans la salle, un grand banc, et avoir un Peter Piot et un Michel Sidibé, ce n'est pas évident tous les jours. Voir Suleiman Boub aujourd'hui au niveau du labo, ce n'est pas pensable. Un Pierre Pelé, Sam Okwara, Cheloulou, Lio Kando, vraiment ce n'est pas évident. Et nous savons qu'aujourd'hui, quand tu vois Innocent, tu penses à Assi, tu penses à Bacha, tu penses à Enda, ainsi de suite. Et réseau africain de personnes vivant avec le VIH. Vraiment merci et merci monsieur le secrétaire, le directeur de ICASA. Vous venez, on va faire une photo, vous applaudissez Michel et Pita, vraiment merci de nous avoir honorés. Donc la salle, vous restez, il y a la seconde session qui va être animée.
Wow. What a session. Can we clap again for this very, very, very informative session? Look. Look, I think the whole session on the foundation and legacy, we could have stayed in this room for hours and hours. So look, we have had this conversation before. I think it is important that we just try and document. There's a lot, so to document. It was good to see those young pictures with Peter Piot, Professor Mboub, and so on and so forth. So the next session will be focusing on now looking ahead, as I said. So we've looked back We've traveled a journey of about 35 years. Then now moving forward, there's a changing environment. And in that changing environment, we hope to elicit some conversation on strategic direction that the SAA can continue in advocacy, in accountability and innovation. So Innocent, we've heard Innocent with a lot of passion. Innocent will be the one moderating this session. Without any further ado, Innocent, I give you the floor to lead this session. Please welcome the next moderator, Mr. Innocent Liaison, who is an activist currently working also with the Society for AIDS in Africa. Innocent, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup, Léo. Alors, vous voyez, nous sommes passés de l'héritage, un peu l'histoire, mais il nous faut nous projeter. Nous projeter dans un contexte qui est assez particulier, où à l'interne, nous parlons de souveraineté. Quasi tous nos États parlent de souveraineté. Souveraineté économique, souveraineté sanitaire, mais également souveraineté pharmaceutique. Qui dit souveraineté, dit autonomie, dit se départir de tout ce qui est ingérence ou dépendance. C'est ça la question. Alors, quand on est dans un tel contexte, qu'est-ce qu'on peut avoir comme perspective pour une réponse durable aux défis de santé auxquels nous faisons face? Pour engager la réflexion autour de cette question-là, et surtout en mettant l'accent sur la capacité ou la capacitation de cette plateforme qui est ICASA et de l'organisation qui la porte, qui est la SAA, nous avons donc voulu avoir des avis de différents horizons. Et nous remercions celles et ceux-là qui ont accepté de partager leurs réflexions avec nous. Dans un premier temps, nous allons avoir la réflexion de Dr. Cheikh Traoré, que je voudrais inviter à monter donc, au podium. Cheikh Traoré, que nous connaissons depuis bien longtemps, qui est activiste, mais qui est surtout directeur donc, du Center for Population Health Initiative, basé au Nigeria. Cheikh, merci d'être venu, que moi je connais essentiellement sur les questions de droits humains. Donc je crois que cette perspective-là va porter, en tout cas avec la coloration des questions liées aux droits humains. Nous avons également l'honneur et le privilège d'accueillir Dr. Timka Falola Ameou. Il faut m'excuser si j'articule mal. Donc, du Nigeria, Naka. Is it the right one? Okay. So thank you for being part of the conversation. So she's the Director of Resource Mobilization. Et puisque nous parlons de contexte financier assez difficile et assez tendu, donc il est bien d'avoir la réflexion sur comment réinventer, comment repenser ce qu'on appelle le financement de la santé, mais également surtout l'investissement dans la santé. So thanks a lot for being part of the conversation. Nous avons également le privilège de recevoir Dr. Fikele Ndolowu, d'Afrique du Sud, qui est Deputy Director, donc General National Department of Health in South Africa. Merci infiniment, so thank you for being part of that conversation and coming with a national perspective on this issue. Et vers la fin, si vous le permettez, il ne va pas monter au podium, mais on aimerait avoir les réflexions du Dr Michel Sidibé sur les perspectives que nous avons. Donc voilà comment va se dérouler simplement la conversation. Cheikh, donc je te passe la parole pour introduire le premier élément de réflexion. Cheikh a une présentation. Oui, oui, mais on ne l'a pas applaudi. Tu peux... Bon, merci. Can someone help on that?
Okay. Thank you, Innocent. Thank you, fellow panelists, colleagues, comrades. Happy to be in Accra for this occasion. The session before was very moving, especially when I saw Professor Kanduluo from Zambia. It was my first ICASA ever, and I think it was 26 years ago. And it shows you how old I am. I also remember that event because I was interested already at the time in the issue of men who have sex with men. And I remember that that topic was not in the conference, but there was one session on men and HIV. And that's where all the activist men who have sex with men tried to get in. Including one person I remember from Zimbabwe. His name was Romeo Truma. He gate crashed the meeting because he wanted to make sure that we talk about men who have sex with men. 5 minutes later, he was thrown out of the conference. 10 years later, I was in Dakar, where President Wade spoke about key populations. And I remember that men who have sex with men from Senegal were not allowed to attend the conference. And as soon as we left, they started getting arrested, all the way to 2009. So it's a topic that I've followed for a long time, but we're at a different time now, and we're looking at the future. So we have to celebrate the progress. Key population leadership has been tremendous in West and Central Africa, where I work, but all across the continent. We have seen key population-led organizations raise funds, and some of them manage budgets of up to $1 million, including in our region here. Cameroon, for example, I know 2 MSM-led organizations. Their combined budget is about $2 million a year. Not many examples in Francophone Africa, unfortunately, but in East Africa, Mozambique, I saw them here, they manage money. So capacity has been built, and we are at the cusp of losing a lot of that money, but capacity is there. The other leadership that we have seen is in the court systems. We know that we are a continent of punitive laws, but we have seen court systems where key populations have won. Botswana, 3 years ago, at the Supreme Court. Even Benin Republic in this region. So key populations are also going to court, defending their rights. Other examples, I work for CPHI, which is an NGO in Nigeria. And over the years, we have seen doctors and nurses who belong to the LGBT community who are happy to come in and work and serve the community. Even though they're criminalized in the country, they choose to stay instead of going to other countries. Like many doctors go away, but they choose to stay and work. So there's leadership which needs to be recognized and needs to be valued and celebrated. In terms of the future, we're talking about future frontiers. So I wanted to highlight maybe 4 areas in terms of frontiers. So first is the issue of funding. We have adopted a funding model which is not helping, especially now that we're talking about freedom from aid, getting away from aid dependency. So we need to question the NGO model. it has serious limitations. We need to start looking at other models. In my organization in Nigeria, we are starting to look at social enterprise models. So models which allow you to sell services and reinvest some of the profits in the organization. So the legal systems can allow us to look at other models where we actually start selling services and trying to overcome the funding environment. We can try different models, maybe during question times, but we need to start learning about other models for our organizations. The other frontier is the leadership frontier. I think this is the time when the divide, there's a very artificial divide, or sometimes very real divide between PLHIV movements and key population movements. So there's been a lot of silos and a lot of fights. So the new leadership that will emerge from here, I mean, this is a historic conference. So new leadership has to emerge, and those new leaders are those who will be able to bridge the divide, KP, non-KP, PLHIV. So we need more Ubuntu. And I think Winnie Bianyua yesterday, in her speech, she talked about Ubuntu. I am because we are. So we need to be a lot more collaborative in these difficult times. The other frontier, and we're talking about integration now, so a lot of talk since the Kigali conference about integrating services, about sustainability. That's a key question for this conference. My own personal views about integration are mixed, because I recognize that in much of West Africa, key populations access already integrated services. We've made a lot of effort, a lot of progress to organize what we could call differentiated services. So in Nigeria, for example, we have the one-stop shop model. So for the last 6-7 years, this is the model that has been used to ensure that key populations are catered for and don't have to face discrimination, violence in public systems. So that model is threatened right now. So we need to think about our positions, especially as we're going into GC8 negotiations. So let's talk about integration, sustainability in this conference, because to be honest, a lot of people are going to suffer from this talk of integration. Many people are going to fall out of service reach in this integration model. So we need to start thinking about what we can do. Lastly, I want to end with the issue of the digital frontier. We have, especially in West Africa, so I'm West African, so I talk a lot about what I see. The issue of digitalization is linked to issues like security. So a lot of the moral panics that we have seen, even in Ghana, we have recurrent moral panics where a story about LGBT goes into the media, and all of a sudden you have weeks and weeks of radio and media talk, and it creates a very hostile climate, and it has direct links with the peer educator who has to go out there and reach his community. And serious concerns about safety of community-led organizations, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to start being serious about safety and security, and the digital techniques are a great, great, great opportunity to do that, as well as being an opportunity also to signpost communities to KP-friendly services. So lots and lots of frontiers that we can talk about. I think we need to begin a lot of this now. Some of it is immediate, some of it is probably medium term, but we have opportunities with the GC8, and I'm looking forward to discuss with many of you about having clear positions on all those frontiers. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks. Merci beaucoup, Sheikh.
Dr. Timka, check among the 4 frontiers, future frontier, talk about remanaging or rethinking the financing mindset. What is the perspective in Nigeria when it's come to reimagine what's health financing and health sector renewal investment? You have the microphone somewhere. Can you help?
Thank you, moderator. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, looking at the future in terms of the frontiers for financial management is something that my country, Nigeria, has been looking into before the disruption. The coordinating minister, the coordinating minister for health and social development in the country actually provided great leadership for that in terms of the health reinvestment program, which is to look at what our system can do and how we can use our system otherwise to address HIV, TB, and malaria in terms of bringing efficiencies, removing verticalization of these 3 related diseases along with other infectious diseases in the country, and looking at the strength that we've garnered over the years from the support of development partners and building on the capacity that exists within the system, and specifically pulling the 3 diseases together in a more realistic and efficient manner, not verticalizing the 3. Also, in the course of managing the disease and looking at resources the last 3-4 years, we also explored the opportunity of trust fund, especially for HIV, like it was done for COVID in the country. But the strategy that was used was more of private sector owned and led strategy model and kind of charity model. Pulling the resources of the big wigs like the Dangote and other rich persons in our economy. But we discovered that this model didn't really work for us because these same private sector leaders are being pulled into so many things. And of course, the economy after the COVID are not being too buoyant for them. So we are looking at more of public and private sector strategy, bringing all stakeholders, which has actually worked over the years, bringing the community players to own the engagement on fundraising for sustaining not just HIV, but health generally. And also providing the platform for all stakeholders to contribute, especially people who are living with HIV and the civil society working in HIV, TB, and malaria. We are also, the President Ahmed Bola Tinubu, also provided clear leadership and focus when disruption came, and we are pushing on that. But of course, he made releases for good chunk of resources to fill the gap, and we are also looking at opportunity of building on that to ensure that we have more releases, appropriation by government institutions. And also specifically looking at the opportunity of health insurance, which of course had been slow over the years in gaining traction within the country itself. So the president actually gave clear direction that we have to onboard and enlist more vulnerable population into the health insurance scheme, including people living with HIV. And this is something that is already gaining traction. And states, we have 36 states and FCT, about 37 countries, because they are all huge and independent. And these are being taken forward at this sub-national level, states and LGA, to identify and ensure vulnerable populations, including HIV, are enlisted. Also, another very important strategy that we know is very critical and we are working on is managing our data to track resources and also the service coverage. And this, we also have some partners, local partners, looking at how we can use AI to predict and track the resources as needed and being deployed. The other very critical and important strategy that we're looking at in the future is what we call presidential unlocking value chain, PVAC system, which is looking at production of commodities, not just of HIV, of all health commodities, including ARTs locally, and getting private sectors to key into this, of course, which we believe will bring down the cost for treatment and management of the diseases, and also present interest, provide platform for more interest of private sectors to engage. We also know Nigerians are very giving and philanthropic. We are also looking at coordination of philanthropic engagements to mobilize local resources, such that when the partners come in, they will do a bit more of technical assistance, where the government and the people give direction to how these resources are being deployed and owned in a very sustainable manner. These are some of the strategies into the future we are looking for, not just for HIV, but all related diseases and within the health sector. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Chimka. Dr. Fikele, what is the context in South Africa when it's come to health insurance and any reform that could be needed to go into that new perspective we have in terms of sustainability, but also in terms of having most investment in health?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. I think I will start with a point that if you understand, in South Africa, the National Health Insurance Act, which was promulgated, is contested heavily. And with that understanding, you will then know it's because health is commercialized as we speak right now, and I'm not sure if other countries are facing that challenge, but in South Africa, it's heavily commercialized. Therefore, our first challenge is to say, how do we take health back into its context of being a public good that needs to service our people. So that's the first area that is a challenge, even though there is an act that exists right now. But then you take a step backwards and you say, if it's coming in a commercialized environment, can we afford it? The truth is that we cannot afford it. We therefore have to look at the system and look at our health system and delivery and be able to reform the system itself so that we are able to deliver what we need to deliver for our people. I therefore take the first point of the financing sustainability, and we say it goes together with accountability and it goes together with health system strengthening. So the first point is to say, how do we strengthen our system? In South Africa, our primary health care, by the way, it's free, which means it's available in our clinics free of charge. But if you are spending, we spend 8% of the GDP in health in a country, which is quite high. And only half of it services almost 84% of our people, and another half services 16%. So you can see that within the available financials, we have the fiscus and the private sector, we have adequate finances if they were really distributed accordingly, and we are able to service everyone. So that's our first challenge, to say, how do you distribute this 8.8% of GDP so that it accommodates everyone? Therefore, with the contestation that happens, you then have to say, firstly, get the system right. And for you to do that, it means primary health care has to be at the core of the national health insurance, and it has to be a functioning primary health care. And I always take one point and say, primary health care doesn't mean clinics. Primary health care means the entire system, starting from individuals at home, families, communities, right into the clinic. And the challenge we face is that the way we've come up with the commodity, we've made health a commodity, that when we talk about primary health care, everybody is talking about the clinic and the functioning of the clinic. But for prevention and health promotion, it's going to happen at a household, it's going to happen in our communities. Therefore, the investment that needs to go in there is what we've removed within the healthcare system. Fortunately, our own healthcare workers who took us to court, by the way, they won the case and we are absorbing into the system. But for us, we do believe in that system. So it means we now have a cadre of 27,000 field community health workers who are going to be driving prevention, health promotion at home. That's the first reform. And we need more than that, and we need to invest more. So that would be the first area as the future of where we're supposed to be going. The second point is that then empower the communities themselves. And I think the role of innovation, when we talk about innovation, we always talk about it from health, from the biomedical. We don't talk about it from a perspective of innovation within our communities and using the AI and all the tools that we have so that we reach all the individuals with the technology that we have, which means we can even tailor-make the services and our health education to the individual because we have the data to be able to do that. That's our next future, which I think talks to the future of where we want to be. The third area is then having the efficiencies. Now, the efficiencies are a serious challenge, which we saw with the donor funding. Some of the donor funding created parallel systems. I'm not sure, again, on other countries, but we know we had those parallel systems. And now we are going back into our own health system and saying, integration would mean, if I'm working in programs, for example, I'm dealing with HIV, TB, malaria, STIs, I should be integrating with the colleagues who are dealing with NCDs, who are dealing with mental health, and all of us are saying, what is that single system that is delivering at a primary health care? And it's only when we do that are we going to realize the efficiencies. The third area around the funding now, which is another area that we are talking on NHI, funding would be domestic, as I've already indicated. From a country perspective, we are putting a lot. But there's a funding that comes from the donor. Who is accounting for that funding? Now, when we talk about accountability, it means all of us have to account. So what we are looking at now internally in the country, say within health, let's have that coordination, and then we all account, donor, public, private, But together as well, working with the AIDS Council at a national level is to say, from a multi-sectoral point, we all have to account. So that accountability mechanism is also being looked at as a process going forward. I think the last issue for us is, I'm going to stress, is the issue of those strategic partnerships, which means we are sitting here, we are saying the regional development organizations, our own private sector, we saw it coming now with the Global Fund replenishment. How do we bring them on board? But when they come in, it shouldn't be to create a parallel system, but it should be coming in an integrated manner. So that is one area also that our future is going to be. Lastly, our communities are still our best way and investment. And I think if we don't realize the role that they can play in ensuring that we deliver this health system, because a curative healthcare will never be affordable. It can only be the promotive, prevention and health promotive type of care that will be affordable within the insurance. Whereas I think the reforms will be coming. I'm still waiting for a similar Abuja declaration that would happen, which means it has to be these stakeholders that are here that will start to drive the issue of health system that is for our people and the finances that we are all accountable for. And let's address the issue of localization and the issue of commercialization of health. It can only be done by a multi-sectoral stakeholder. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Dr. Fikele. One last for all of you. Considering there's future frontier and this perspective, what will be the strong recommendation, one strong recommendation you will formulate for SAA and ICASA if they want to play a catalytic role in this dynamic? You can start, Sheikh, if you want.
Okay, if I'm starting. I actually believe it's a similar role that they played when HIV was in denial. It's a similar role that we need right now, where we are seeing for us to have equity and social justice in terms of health, we need the voices of the multi-sectoral stakeholders that are here. And I think SAA would be the real organization that should be able to be driving the integration we are talking about, driving the issue of finances, driving the issue of localization, and pushing, because there are people out there who would go against this discussion on the basis of the profits that are being made out of the health system. So it will take us collectively to be able to say, and the role of SAA is to say, let it also be an engine that started in that year. They still have a role even now. Thank you.
So the role of ICASA?
ICASA comme son organisation, parce que ICASA c'est la plateforme, la SAA c'est l'organisation. Quel rôle catalytique ces deux-là, l'organisation et la plateforme, pourraient jouer justement dans cette dynamique et ces perspectives qui sont en vue?
Yep. Okay, so I think ICASA started off as an organization.
Juste une recommandation forte.
Yeah. So it's disease focus, and in today's world, we realize the importance of gender and human rights. So one recommendation is to have an approach which combines or mainstreams human rights, gender into all approaches to disease control.
Merci beaucoup.
For me, I think the key role for ICASA as a platform, a multi-sectoral, multi-country platform, is for high-level advocacy to institutions in Africa, starting from AU, to take positive stand on ensuring we own the management of disease conditions on the continent. to also give clear strategies for what has worked over the years, and especially for countries to take ownership and take a stand together, one, to say we want to take responsibility for our people. We want to ensure we care for our people in the way we understand it, because no system does not like his or our own child to care for it. That in Africa, we want to care for our people the best way it works for us. And ICASA as an advocacy tool to take leadership and talk to the platforms for government across all sectors, especially health sector on the continent. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Please help me to applaud really strongly our three panelists. Thanks a lot. But I can't conclude that session without asking the elders. We are in Africa. During the first session, you have the monument. We are lucky to have them here. In Wolof, they said that a young man could climb the tree being up, and the old man is down and can see what the young man, even his high, could not see. We're talking about perspective, Dr. Michel Sidibe. You know the past, you know the present, and you were strongly placed to give us advice, especially for SAA and ICASA in perspective of the new frontier or the future frontier we envisage. Merci beaucoup, Michel, de votre présence et de votre générosité pour partager avec nous.
Thank you very much, Innocent. It is a very difficult task. My father used to tell me, you know, advice from someone else is like a big garbage. But even in this big garbage, you can find something useful for you. So I want to have a humility to say that after listening this very good panelist and also the past and all the 3 days, that my reflection will take into account all those different intervention and perspective. If you allow me, just taking some stock of what I've been seeing for years, it's almost 45 years that I am in this global space of global health. And I want to say that ICASA, if ICASA was not existing, we would have reinvented ICASA. Because ICASA was a unique platform which could really bring all those different groups, even though, like if you said rightly, that it was starting with scientists and others. But the social movement imposed themselves. And we move out of that to really not look at it as a disease like you were saying, but we try to look at it like Sheikh was mentioning, on more horizontal manner. So for me, after saying all of that, ICASA honestly must evolve from the largest HIV conference in Africa to become a continental engine. You use the word, I like that one, for moving beyond visibility to impact. And that is, for me, very, very, very important point. It means that we cannot continue to just have a number and bringing a lot of people and be satisfied that we achieve. But ICASA today, people are looking for certainly as a platform more than that one, an engine, which will push for producing results in a different and create impact. So that for me is a very important reflection we need to have. Second reflection, I think it should be an engine driving measurable progress. I had a lot of discussion, we have but we need to be able to really be taking out of here few things which can really help us to push our political leaders to say that, oh, that is the voice of the continent. It is not just a voice of scientists or others or coming from US or others. It's a voice of a continent on critical areas where we need to make a difference. And that should be captured, and I think is important from me. I think it should be also an engine, from my point of view, capable to turn a commitment into some co-investment. And that is the most difficult part, because we are all seeing resources going down, things are coming, but how we can really use this type of platform to identify what type of new mechanism can come out for financing this universal health coverage, whatever you want, and link that to, of course, financing some disease. So for me, that's, you cannot have this type of big thinkers coming and not having those type of platform which can help us to make some kind of difference. But at the end, like I said, I think the point which is important is making community voice, continuing to make those voices accountability in action, and not miss that one, and trying to capture that strongly in our discussion. But I will advise to trustees and others really to have a small group which could be put in place to reflect more seriously on, after 35 years and 23 years of international conference, what it means in this current political and geopolitical environment. So that's what I will add to excellent discussion. I was listening with a lot of interest. Thank you.
Merci infiniment. J'aurais eu tort si je n'avais pas insisté pour vous donner la parole. Merci, je voudrais vraiment qu'on applaudisse Cher, merci infiniment. Docteur Fikele, merci, merci. Docteur Timka, merci, merci infiniment. On va prendre une photo et je vais demander à notre ami Léo donc, de nous faire la synthèse et puis je crois qu'il y a une suite, hein, Léo. Il y a quelque chose qui va se... Ok, parfait.
Colleagues, I think it's been a wonderful, wonderful session. I see Professor Morenike say we should clap. Let's clap for ourselves. I think it was good. And we did achieve the objective that we had, so from the foundation to the legacy. We also have some strategic direction, so from SAA and ICASA, building on what Peter Piot has shared in his last slide, and also what Michel has provided in terms of guidance.